that each value is so full of subtlety and strength to change lives, change classrooms, change staff rooms, change playgrounds. So I got involved in 1989 when a lot of change was hitting teachers. The government of the time had brought in the national curriculum, and teachers were losing their autonomy, and it was becoming quite soul-destroying for teachers. And a lot of them I saw were falling ill or taking early retirement or just giving up. It was like they were being forced to teach in ways that weren't true to them. And but what I found interesting was, I was doing research on schools at the time, was how some schools got through the change that was being imposed on them and came out all the stronger, and other schools were crushed by the change. So I wanted to discover, and I researched it for 3 years, what was it that enabled teachers to get through the change safely? And this is why I feel it's so important right now when we're going through chaos and breakdown, how to ensure that values are given, used to the full, because they are our biggest resource. They're our biggest resource. So what I saw was one teacher in Trafford, in Greater Manchester, who was quite an experienced teacher, and she was criticised by the inspectorate for her maths that was deficient. They found it deficient and not doing enough for business studies, which were being required at the time in primary schools. She had year 6 form, and she felt really discouraged at the criticisms. But she went back to her values. She thought, what's really important to me? And she thought, well, what's really important to me is that these young people, these year 6, emerge from school confident, valuing equality, and able to bring about positive change. So instead of referring back to the maths and how she was going to follow the curriculum exactly, she got a game called the Trading Game from Christian Aid, where resources were, it was a game where you were in groups and you played with having different quantities of resources to create wealth. And of course, the game shows, some of you might be familiar with it, the game shows that things are very, very unequal in the world. In doing the game, she worked on the number of resources, how they were divided. There was lots of maths built into it. They looked at distribution of wealth, again, lots of maths built into it. And then one day they came into class and they each had a gold coin on the table. And back then that was worth quite a lot. It was £1. And she said, you each have this to set up a business, little school business, whatever you want, to make food, little notebooks, craft work, whatever. But be aware of what is your income, what's your expenditure, what's your profit. And then as the class, they decided where they wanted to invest that profit, and they decided to reach the agreement on investing it in street children in Brazil. So she did a lot of maths in the process, a lot of business studies, plus covered geography, English, oracy, so much of the curriculum, and had a thriving classroom. And it was her courage to stay with what was true for her and what she really knew she wanted to give the children in her class. So instead of being crushed, she flourished. Another story is a story of how magic broke out in a school. But before we do this second story, I'd like to invite us to just take a moment's meditation. So if you could have your feet on the ground, shake out any tension in your shoulders, and either close your eyes or fix your eyes on a point. And now just become aware of your breath and breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in calm. Breathe out ease. Breathe in deep. Breathe out slow. Breathe in smile. Breathe out release. Breathe in present moment. Wonderful moment. And in this present wonderful moment, be aware of how you're feeling. And be aware of what one value you would really want to give to children before they leave school. What value, what quality, what would it be? When you're ready, open your eyes. And if you're able to put in the chat, that'd be great. What quality is? What came to my mind is self-belief, confidence, to have the faith in themselves that they can get through whatever life throws at them, to have that faith and belief in themselves. And in the work we've done in values, we always start in this present moment. In this present moment, what's happening to us? Knowing, as we as educators know, as human beings we know, at the heart of the human experience is joy and sorrow. So if that is at the heart of human experience, how do we equip ourselves to uncover the joy, create the joy, and face with courage, with self-belief, with self-awareness, the problem, the issue, the obstacle? So right at the moment, my neighbor has a class, year 2, where she's got 15 pupils. Is mainstream school who have special needs, and the class is complete chaos. And one of the first tools we can bring to the classroom is calm. And the first things we do is to practice that stilling exercise. I call it a 1-minute meditation, which we've just all done together. Just breathing in, breathing out, breathing in calm, breathing out ease. and remembering to smile, and remembering to bring ourselves into this present moment and be aware of what we're feeling and be aware of what's important to us. So I taught this stilling exercise. Stillness I see as the first tool to really bring to the fore our values. And I was working with a school in Trafford in Greater Manchester, again, St. Hugh's. And it was a wonderful school, a very lovely school, a wonderful head teacher who met every pupil every morning and greeted them by name at the school gates with great happiness. He was very twinkly. But the school had a big problem. There was war between the head teacher, who was very inclusive, and the priest. It was a Catholic school, as I said, and the priest wanted a school that was very strictly Catholic, and the head teacher wanted a school that was very inclusive. And this conflict, big personality clash, had been going on for years. Governors' meetings that should have taken an hour took 3 hours. They were just in endless contradiction of each other. And it got to the point it was almost going to go to solicitors for them to sort out. Well, we had a meeting of parents and teachers and the school priest, and it was to look at bringing values and visions into school. So we were all the teachers were there, a good number of parents. It was after school meeting, and in marched the priest, looking furious. Who was this? Well, I was quite a young woman then. Who was this woman wanting to bring values and visions into his school? Spiritual awareness. Who was it? It was up to him to decide how values would be done. So he walked in very red in the face, and you could just feel the anger he was feeling, and sat down. And we were about to start meeting with this very same exercise I took you through of just breathing deeply and becoming still. I looked round at the deputy head and said, I'm not sure we can do this with this much of anger. And Tony Ray, the deputy, said, Georgeanne, you make us all do this stillness. The priest can do it too. So we did the stilling exercise, became still, became calm. And then I just introduced the subject. And I gave an example of one of the activities we do in values, which is to celebrate, to appreciate. And we do something called a hot seat. And I put the priest in the hot seat and invited everyone there, teachers and parents, to just go inside for a moment and become aware of something they appreciated about the priest. Then we went round the circle and each in turn said something they appreciated about the priest. And of course, if we stop and really just take a moment, become present and let go of all our prejudices, when we see another human being in front of us, of course we can see values in them, qualities in them we appreciate. So I can't remember what I said, but perhaps I just said that I really appreciated that he'd come and that he had helped create such a beautiful school. Anyway, the priest, who had arrived so tense and angry, became quite relaxed and smiled when he heard all these very honest and appreciative things about it. But the interesting thing that happened was the next day, the priest went and knocked on the head teacher's door and went in and said to the head teacher, I need to ask you to forgive me. I've made your life very difficult these past years. Please forgive me. Well, Kevin, the head, was quite taken aback, couldn't believe his ears. This person had become such an enemy, asking for forgiveness. And the priest said again, yes, I need you to forgive me. So peace actually broke out in the school. And when there's peace, it is so much easier to have a happy, focused, calm classroom where people can explore. This first tool, I'd like to cover 5 tools, but I'm not sure we will. But this first tool, the stillness, is so, so powerful. Another teacher, Leisha, who some of you know, a chemistry teacher in a secondary school, given one of the hardest classes in the school, where it was very, very disruptive. And students just not able to focus or be present. And in despair, she thought, well, you know what helps me when things are going wrong is meditation. So I'm going to teach them some meditation. So the next time she went into the classroom, she taught them just how to become present, just to become, as one of you said, self-aware, become present with oneself. Breathe, relax, be light, be easy, be deep, be calm. And those students who'd seemed so rough and ready and challenging became calm. And then Leisha was able to get on and teach them some chemistry. And after a few months, and every class she would do that, start with the mindful meditation, the stillness. One day she went in and she thought, well, let's just get on with the chemistry. But as she turned to start writing on the board, hand went up, Miss, we haven't had our meditation. We need our meditation first. So she'd engaged them, and the young people really valued that opportunity to be calm. And one of you said, I think Gladson, the importance of courage. It takes courage to go into some schools and teach stillness, because we live in such a busy world. Value actually by many people is placed on being very busy. Whereas in fact, if we want to tap into these extraordinary values within us, we need to be able to become still and go within. So that is the power of the value of peace. That school, the angry priest was prepared to become quiet and peaceful. And of course, out of any one value, many others come. So out of peace, that time, forgiveness emerged. The next story I'd like to tell you is a story about the value of love. Back in 2017, there was the worst disaster that had happened in England since the Blitz, when Grenfell Tower burnt down and over 70 people died and more injured. And I went into a school where the teacher, Annie Mitchell, wanted before anything that the children, it was primary school, that the children understood the value of the fruits of the Spirit, one of which is love. And in her assembly, the day after the Grenfell fire, They looked at the fire and how the children felt about it. They looked at who were the heroes in that situation. The firefighters who'd come, the people who gave shelter and comfort. And then she asked the children to think, what can we do as a school in the face of this tragedy? What do we do when we see something so terrible? And she encouraged the children to talk in pairs or threes about what the school could do. Some thought, well, we could send food, we could send clothes. But what emerged was what we can do as a school when something terrible like this comes. What we can contribute is we can be a loving school. We can contribute love, and everything else will flow from love. So what they decided, or what she suggested, is that every day when the school was loving, when conflicts were resolved kindly, when there was kindness and love, they would, on the dado bar that went round the school corridors, they'd put a heart, a red heart, that day celebrating the love the school had expressed. And if one day there had been anger and conflict that wasn't resolved, they wouldn't put a heart. So when I went in, there was a beautiful, all different hearts, you know, not the classes made their own hearts, but hearts about happy, going round the corridor. So there was this real focus on love. And in each of these qualities we're talking about, it's about empowering the young people to go inside and unearth for themselves these values and how to express them and put them into action. So we've looked at the qualities of peace and of love. The next one I'd like to look at is joy. I taught this same head teacher, Annie Mitchell, for about an hour. She was very eager to put values into action and saw very much the spiritual strength of those. After a good talk with her, she said, well, now you need to listen to the children. Let me just find you some children to take you around the school. She opened her door and just the children passing by, she said, invited those two in, Atul and Isabel, 10, 11-year-olds, and said, would you show Georgiana around? She would like to look at the school and explore more how we work on our values. So they took me around and then we had a good talk. They showed me many things of values in action, but I was struck by something which I think I will keep with me all my life. Atul, an 11-year-old, had been talking about perseverance and how he'd persevered to overcome something. And then he said, and joy is like perseverance. I must always keep my joy. I must never let anyone take my joy away from me. My joy is my joy, and I shall never let anyone take it away. Atul was 11 at the time. He and his family had come a few years earlier as refugees from Afghanistan. And his family has gone through a lot. and his family is currently, his grandparents are still in Afghanistan. Atul now is 19, and I'm still in touch with him because my grandson is friends with him. Atul's family has gone through divorce. Atul's family in Afghanistan are suffering from the Taliban's treatment of women. And yet, I will never let anyone take my joy away from me, he said. So I feel Atul was very wise. So these three enormous values of peace, of love, of joy, and the courage to live by them and put them into practice. We can never place a value on these values because each one is pregnant with so much possibility and opportunity for creativity, discovery. I've many more stories of schools and how teachers have enabled children to discover the importance of values and to apply them. One teacher who was concerned about the environment invited the children to think about all the things that were concerned in the environment and then to turn it around into what they really wanted to do. They wanted to recycle, they wanted to reuse, they wanted to reduce. And every day at the end of the class, he would stand at the classroom door, and as each one went out, they would tell him what had they done. They'd reduced, they'd recycled, they'd prepared. And so as putting the values into action in the here and now. So the tools in Values and Visions, we came up with the project that I worked on from 1989. We understood very much that to unearth these values and to use them, we needed tools. So the first tool we've talked about, stillness. The next tool was listening, really listening with 2 ears, 2 eyes, and an open heart. So that whoever was speaking, we'd listen to them. Not just with ears, but eyes and open heart. Of course, some pupils wouldn't want to make eye contact, and we must respect that. But as far as possible, to really behold each other when they're speaking, whether it's in the school council or in the playground or the classroom. And for everything that we teach for children, we need to teach with the teachers. If you look at a happy staff room, you'll find happy classrooms. If you find a complaining, condemning, criticizing staff room, it's quite possible you'll find complaining classrooms. So all these things we need to work with teachers on. So stillness, listening, celebration. I talked about hot seating the priest, the angry seat. Celebration links with Atul's joy. How can we each day, however tough it is, celebrate? In fact, the tougher it is, the more we need to celebrate. I was struck by a story where when the peasants were pushed off the land in Central America in the 60s and 70s, where if they resisted, they were tortured and killed. When they found themselves in refugee camps, they set up 5 committees: 1, to have shelter; 2, to have food; 3, to have healthcare; 4, to have education; and 5, and perhaps most important, to have celebration. Celebration where we can sing, we can dance, we can laugh, we can have fun, we can remember we're human beings who are here. In fact, we're souls who are here to live fully and celebrate each other, celebrate the day. This morning, I saw something I'd never seen before, beautiful golden full moon at about 5:30 this morning. No getting on after 6, and it was sinking into the horizon. Celebrate the moon's setting, celebrate just the wonder of people, of the courage of people. We're bombarded with negativity, and there is indeed much to grieve. There is much to grieve of what's happening. But grief isn't a dwelling place, and we need to be able to move into celebration. So just that head teacher greeting each pupil by name and in his heart celebrating them, the difference that made to the school. So celebration, I mentioned grieving, a really important tool, not to pretend that the grief's not there, but to give children space and opportunities to safely express grief. The fourth tool is visioning. I asked you at the beginning this evening just to become still and to project forward. What is it? What is your vision? What is it you'd truly like to give young people when they leave school? To hold a clear vision. At the moment, our world is very broken, volatile, uncertain, chaos, ambiguous. It's turmoil for many people. Many people are exhausted. For many people, it can feel soul destroying. But can we have the courage to leap over into the future and to see a peaceful, loving, joyful future? So to have a clear vision of where we're going and to create our own vision and start creating it from right now, here and now. And the last tool that I'd like to just mention this evening is journaling. And journaling, a little book, an empty book, where each day you can write what you celebrate about the day. And perhaps know what was really difficult, what might be grief, and use the journal as a friend that is always there to listen, a space almost like your own private room where you can practice being still, discovering your vision, celebrating, grieving. So these are tools. If we don't have tools to access our values and qualities, they can easily be like, we could have the most wonderful jewels, emeralds and rubies and diamonds and gold. But if we were in a desert and just left them lie on the ground unused, the winds of the desert would blow and they'd be covered and buried and lost and of no use at all. And we have all the influences on us of the negativity of the media, of the brutality of conflict, the greed. We have all those influences on us that can distract us from the immense, unlimited power of values that we have inside us. And when we're looking at values and visions, we start in the here and now. We pass the obstacle in the here and now through the prism of our deepest values and our highest vision. And we hold that tension of the two, and we look at a human being recognizing that human being has infinite potential for goodness and greatness, infinite potential for messing up. You know, you can start the day, the alarm goes off, and you could say, oh, bother. You know, you've already started to wreck your day. Look out the window. Oh, it's a miserable day. It's raining. You know, we have infinite potential for just becoming very ordinary at best and pretty ghastly and negative too. And there are four things about human being: this infinite potential for goodness and power, infinite potential for messing up, which we see at the moment. And each human being is unique, so we never have to compare ourselves to anyone else. We only have to be our unique self. Lynn, who is here tonight, there's only ever going to be one Lynn on this earth. She's utterly unique. And then the fourth thing we need to know about a human being, that we do know, is that moment by moment we have a choice. Do we live up to our highest potential, or do we go for mediocre, or do we go for negative, destructive, limited? So I love working with values because I see people arrive exhausted and go away enthusiastic. I see people who are dispirited, their arms crossed, their legs crossed, closed, shut, shutters down. Just open up with the happiness of being back in touch with who they are. I see people who come in worried and anxious and stressed and awake at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I see them realizing, yes, they have big obstacles in their lives, but they have the strength within them. They have the courage within them. They have the self-awareness within them. And they have the love, the peace, the joy, and the capacity to cooperate with each other and live life in a way which is fulfilling. So I guess that's why I've spent getting on for 40 years on this work, because there is nothing more rewarding than seeing people become fulfilled and able to draw on this greatest resource that they have, the inner resource, and share it with others. So that's a little bit about the power of values and why they're so important, which I think everyone on this call knows, but the practical tools that we can use. And for me, well, in the work I've done, it's always a cycle. You take whatever experience there is, whether it's Grenfell, whether it's the Ukraine, whether it's peace process, whatever, or retention of teachers, illness, absenteeism, take whatever is the current thing that's of concern, pass it into reflection using these tools of stillness, listening, celebration, grieving, visioning, journaling. Pass it into reflection, and out of the reflection, discern what is your purpose now? What is the action you're going to take? And that action then becomes the new experience. And you take that experience, drop it into reflection. Out of the reflection comes the purpose of an action. And I've seen young people who have such stature, whether at the age of 8 or 18, such wisdom, because they're able to reflect, they're able to discern their purpose and their action and put it into action. And yes, some schools are jewels, some schools are just, I love them because they're microcosms of how the world can be. And when teachers are courageous and draw on their own values, we see transformation happen. We see forgiveness break out. We see peace break out. What more can I say except it's lovely to be here and be able to share.